was rapidly replacing that of Panmure. To give some idea of how full the Whites' lives had become, here is a list of routine services conducted by Mr. White. There was Sunday communion and either matins or evensong at St. Peter's. There was Sunday communion and either matins or evensong held at the waiting room of the railway station pending the building of St. John's. That was held every Sunday. Then there were weekday services at Cove Rock, at Igoda. There were frequent visitations along the Keiskammer to all the farms on the banks of the Keiskammer and along the Buffalo, almost as far as Fort Cook. And also there were services held monthly at Chalumna, St. Andrew's Chalumna. Within 2.5 years, St. Peter's had been freed of all debt, and St. John's had risen, a better designed and a larger building than originally planned, thanks to an dishonest builder, and thanks to the energy of and enterprise of the Whites very largely. This building, St. John's building, was completed and all debt was wiped out. An account of one Sabbath will give some idea of Mary White's contribution to her husband's ministry. She arrived at Chalumna by wagon early on Sunday morning, where someone was waiting for her at the church with the news that a young child was dying on a farm 5 miles distant, and the parents begged that she would come to their aid. She immediately mounted a horse, not having ridden once in the last 15 years, and set off armed with her medicine chest, providentially brought with her. Having physicked the child, she returned to church on horseback, arriving just in time to preside at the harmonium. After service, she hung the curtains she had made especially to dull the blinding glare of the whitewashed east wall. Then she mounted the horse and rode once more to visit her young patient, whom she found sleeping peacefully and very much better. The child made a complete recovery. At nightfall, she returned to the wagon, which was waiting inspanned at the church, and then began the journey home by moonlight. Both husband and wife were individuals of strong personality, offset by a selfless sense of duty and an innate kindliness which made everyone their friend. Almost every steamer putting in from England brought cases of gifts, of books, church furnishings, garments, etc., for the promotion of their work. Every church bazaar and sale of work, and these were legion, believe me, were generously launched on a nucleus from these parcels from Britain. The White Harmonium, ruined on the Koh-i-Noor, was replaced by a gift of a brand new one, which Mrs. White, to her immense satisfaction, had installed in St. Peter's in time for the Easter Day service in 1881. The same harmonium, incidentally, is still in use in the All Saints Church, Orange Grove, over 80 years old. Little St. Peter's Church, the schoolroom, was lovingly equipped with gifts from friends. Most beautiful of all was the lovely crucifix still adorning the altar, given in memory of young Henry White, the second eldest boy, whose accidental drowning in a rock pool below Hood Point Lighthouse, not long after the Whites' arrival, it tested the Christian fortitude of his mother and father beyond human limit. Both Mr. and Mrs. White had a particularly warm spot in their capacious hearts for the congregation of St. Andrew's at Chalumna, and believe it or not, For the 2.5 years of Mr. Wyche's incumbency, Chellamna was able to boast a very well-stocked library from the gifts of books which came from England. The Wyches made a full contribution to the social life of the community. By and large, East London houses were too small for entertainment in the 70s, and for entertainment on any scale. But the Wyches Rectory, considered one of the best houses in East London, was an exception to the rule. It served as the venue for for very many gatherings, both secular and sacred. And Mrs. Wyche, to her husband's open wonderment, supplied an abundance of refreshments on each occasion, apparently from nowhere. Domestic entertainment being ruled out generally, owing to lack of space, East Londoners were much addicted to picnics. Favourite spots were the wooded banks of the Buffalo and the Nahoon. The Wyches, possibly for geographical reasons, had a preference for what they called clogs drift from inner information. It would appear that that was the Igora. Clogs drift it was called by them. And Sandy Beach, which from internal evidence would appear to be Shelley Beach. These were their favourite picnicking spots. Such picnics frequently involved leisurely miles by ox wagon. It was on picnics such as these that the Wyches were introduced to grilled chops and sasatis. Their monthly trip to St Andrew's, Chellamna, 4 days to and fro, was a regular, delightful picnic which the whole family looked forward to and prayed that there would be no rain. The journey involved crossing 5 drifts, which the slightest shower could in a few moments turn into treacherous death traps. The Chellamna River itself was tidal at the ford and was the most treacherous drift of all. So concerned did the parishioners become for the safety of their priest that their first gift to him, and at a time when they could ill afford it, was a stout bullock cart and 4 powerful oxen. His dependence upon any old vehicle which he was able to hire from anyone at the end of each month seemed fraught with much unnecessary risk. These leisurely trips to Chellamna opened up a wider circle of good friends, and they enjoyed fabulous hospitality at every farm they visited, together with very severe reproaches from any whose farms they found they were unable to visit. The Gowers of Christmas Vale, they became great friends, and also a source of homegrown coffee. A delightful character mentioned was, I think it's Mr. Kay, the field cornet of the district. Perhaps someone might be able to tell us who this individual is. He became a firm favourite as well. Mrs. White writes her friends a delightful story about Mrs. Kay's wife, who must have been an Afrikaans-speaking lady. On their first call at the Kays, Mrs. Kay asked Mr. White if he threw water over children. Fortunately, he was sufficiently quick-witted to grasp the import of the question. He had no sooner expressed willingness to do so immediately than a message brought the Baywoner, his wife, and an infant in arms to the house at the Double, and the baby was duly baptized. It had water thrown at it. Then Mrs. White, characteristically, inscribed her own prayer book suitably and presented it to her new godchild. Besides picnics, evening conversaziones were immensely popular in East London in those days. These consisted of conversation, music, song, speeches. Refreshments were prepared as a community effort. Households would lend tables, chairs, crockery, flowers, and food. The watchers were quick to exploit the popularity of the conversazione for raising church funds. Dancing, of course, was most popular among the younger set, and was said to be the only scheduled form of entertainment capable of keeping East Londoners up after 11 p.m. In one letter, Mr. White defined the main events of East London's daily life as consisting of wrecks and picnics. It was after almost the first night in the rectory, sleepless on account of a gale and thunderstorm, the watchers found next morning a large vessel, the Sea Wave, perched on the rocks immediately below the rectory. If East Londoners were rather tardy when it came to preventing ships from going aground, they were certainly adept at disposing of them after the event. Within 48 hours of the vessel going aground, not only all the salvaged cargo had been disposed of by auction, but all the timber hull had been knocked down to the harbour master on behalf of the government for £100. The last copied letter, dated the 27th July 81, mentions, among events of more immediate tragedy for the watchers, an unprecedented storm, during which no less than 3 vessels at anchor in the roadstead lost their anchors, were wrecked with the loss of 30 lives. As mentioned earlier, the background to the events these letters describe was the extraordinary succession of native wars. These disturbances approached no nearer East London than Imvani, near Queenstown. Nevertheless, East Londoners were much more closely involved. The 40th Regiment had moved almost direct from East London to Isandlwana. Many wives of troopers and officers were in East London still when news of the massacre arrived. And you remember that the 40th was practically wiped out to a man. It was a great shock for the watchers, for many of the 40th had become regular worshippers at St. Peter's, and Mr. White had been military chaplain at Fort Glamorgan as well. So very many of the dead men had been intimate friends, and the task of comforting the widows and children was most distressing. But hostilities nearer East London than Zululand had a most potent effect upon the East London district. Practically every able-bodied man had been called up for service, and on the one or other of the different fronts, vehicles, horses, cattle had been requisitioned by the military, and the watchers' visitations to Chelumna and the Keiskammer revealed that many a farm on which the women on their own were quite unable to cope with the farm work, farms developed by years of industry were going to rack and ruin. Lack of transport meant lack of markets for the produce, and the immobilization was preventing many children from going to school. Most trying of all, perhaps, was a lack of authentic news beyond the occasional telegraph bulletins. Such circumstances invariably encourage the spread of rumours. Their English friends remonstrated with the watchers on account of their reticence concerning events practically on their doorstep. Mr. White good-humouredly replied that actually people in England were being far more fully informed on these local matters than East Londoners, who were dependent upon the local rag containing naught besides advertisements and local intelligence. He, in return, requested English friends to send on their old newspapers to him in East London so that he could learn something about what was happening. Now we come to the which is best